Hi, fellow geochemists and geochemistry enthusiasts. Welcome to Geochemistry, the only podcast that combines geochemistry and tea. And no, we're not talking about the tea that you drink, but good old-fashioned gossip. Our mission is to inspire and to shed light on the topics not fancy enough to talk about at a Congress, but important enough to delve into. Now, without further ado, I'm your host, Sam Schur, and this week we will be talking with Reinmann Ojeda about geochemical mapping, technique or art. Reinmann Ojeda is a senior exploration geologist and geochemist at Antofagasta Minerals. Reinmann, welcome to Geochemistry.
Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for coming by the show.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored that you remember me. so no.
How can I forget?
Okay. No, glad to be with you today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so just thinking back on your story, because one of the things that we like to do here is to just introduce how we became geochemists. So yours is pretty interesting and one that blends being an explorationist with geochemistry. So what's your journey been? And have you found there to be any red tape towards achieving your goals?
Well, I have to say that I never think about to become a geochemist. So perhaps I can start telling you that, well, I will tell you something. When I was in school, I have a geochemist, chemistry as an optional signature. So one day my teacher told me, Germán, you have to learn chemistry. No, I will not. When I will be a professional, I will never see chemistry again. Wrong. So I started studying geology, and at least in the University of Chile, geochemistry is not something that you learn too much. But I had an optional signature with the professor Brian Townley, and we had a field trip to El Teniente mine, and it was awesome. We were working in order to study some baseline because they had some projects for the mine, and getting the long story short, I didn't learn too much, but still I approved I approve it. But I did some. I have some good feelings with Brian. And one day, like walking through the corridor, I crashed with Brian, and he told me, Germán, I have a project related to geochemistry. Would you like to do a master thesis with me? And I told him, okay, master thesis, please explain me what this is all about. Well, it happens that I'm designing some geochemistry collectors, and I want to see if they work in order to detect copper deposit buried under covers. And I looked to him and said, Brian, that will not work. Definitely what you're explaining to me, they will not work. I don't see how it will work. So I told him, I will prove you're wrong. So I accepted the thesis, and well, I have to admit that when I finished my thesis, I went to Brian and I told him, Brian, I was wrong. You were right. The collector worked it, so that was a nice way to start my geochemistry path, and I started to love it. So that's how I entered, like telling someone that without any clue that he was wrong.
I bet Brian really liked that.
Yeah, he told me, I was looking for someone that was thinking in that way. So with no bias, with nothing. So it was a very nice project,
And so these
and I learned.
collectors were just looking for gases that were coming out of the soil.
Yeah, that was the idea. It was ions and gases going through the core. There was a lot of work done by Cameron, Smith, Kelly. That it was quite popular in that days with the MMI, Emsam Leach, and things like that. And we tried to prove all those methods through the cover. So we did that project with Codelco, with Álvaro Puig. So I learned a lot, and that was my first approach to geochemistry, and it was quite nice.
That's super interesting. It's so funny how like I can know people for a long time and then just now just learn a little bit more about people and their stories are
Yeah,
pretty funny.
yeah, I know it was funny. I think that the only thing that was not funny was to dig holes in the Atacama Desert day by day, like getting like 400 samples. It was just west of the Chuquicamata mine. It was an area called the Toki cluster. It was hot, dry. No, it was awful,
And
and
as
with
a
a lot of
student,
caliche in the soil. So you try to dig, and you got this salty crust that it was impenetrable. No, it was hard. Yeah.
and as a student, I can imagine you didn't really have field assistants.
Yeah, I had one very good field assistant. So no, but no, well, the red tape. Okay,
I guess, yeah,
happens.
jumping into the red tape.
Yeah, it happens that we took all the samples, the 400 samples. We put the collectors plus we got a soil sample, and we submit these samples to a lab. I will not say what lab, and they lost the samples. And I had to took the 400 samples again. No, it was terrible. So no. So
Oh
so
my goodness.
so we took the samples again when we went to pick up the collectors. So we did the sampling again. No, it was terrible.
But you were
Well,
fit, so there's that.
yeah, of course. I was young with hair, and yeah, yeah. No,
Great.
it was,
So,
it was
with
funny.
that in mind, I guess any tips or advice to give our listeners wanting to break into geochemistry?
Uh, Perhaps two things. Don't drink too much. Always put an eye on your samples. No. An advice. I don't, perhaps my advice is not be afraid of geochemistry. Perhaps I have a very nice experience in geochemistry, and I will say that talk a lot with your colleagues, approach to your senior geochemist, because perhaps my feeling is that in the geochemistry sub branch of the geology, uh, there I don't feel too much egos. So geochemists, I think that they are going always be willing to teach you as a young geologist. That's in my experience. I had a lot of mentors, very good mentors, and that's it. Like speak, question, approach, don't be afraid, and go forward. So, and we need a lot of more geochemists in our jobs. So,
And I agree with that. I found that I also had some very willing mentors. Didn't matter how bad the question was, they were willing to put up with it, and people still are. I'm not necessarily a young geochemist anymore, but people still are willing to answer questions about really anything. And I think that you're completely right, that we do need more people in our field, and that's something that I'm really interested in doing. And that's part of the theme of this podcast, is really just trying to show people that this field is interesting, and that we're all here really to help them.
Yeah, no, I have to say, to congratulate you to Sam with this podcast. I think that it will be very beneficial for all the geologists that will hear. Hope they will learn something from me. I don't know.
Vamos a ver.
Vamos a ver. So, yeah.
All right, cool. So
that's it. Yeah, don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. I love it.
Take samples.
And take them twice.
Yeah.
And not just for QA/QC. Just take them twice.
Yep.
All right, cool. I think you've done a pretty good job of humanizing geochemists here with your past few little stories, but that's maybe not so much tea materials. So if you want to just dish us some tea, what kind of stories do you have? Just give us a little flavor.
Okay. It's difficult to talk about tea without remembering some geopubs things, but and people drinking beer, but I will not talk about that because that things stays in the bar.
Well, I mean, but also we are classy folk, right? And we don't get out of control. So
yeah, no, we don't. No, but I think that well, I have to go again back to my student times. When I finished my thesis, one of the compromises with Codelco in that moment was that the thesis was going to be presented in the EACS that was held in Oviedo that time. By that time, I didn't speak in English for anyone. So, for my surprise, I was selected to do the lecture just after the opening. So it was in the conference room was full of people. I was quite nervous, and the thing is that I was told that perhaps that one of the most renowned geochemists in that time already knew my work, and he didn't like it. So I did my speech, and the only question came from him. And I didn't knew much how to answer that question, but well, I think I solved it a little bit. But also then in the coffee break, I crashed with him in the corridor, and he told me, Herman, with his black humor, he told me, Herman, your work is awful. Well, that was one of my. Later, he was one of my mentors, and I miss him too very much. He was Peter Winterburn. It was the first real geochemist that gave me his feedback, and it was
unfiltered advice. Yes.
But it was his humor, and then I felt so bad in that moment, but then I knew him, and he was quite a nice person. I learned too much from him, and we miss him. We miss him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, this podcast, and for those that don't know Peter Winterburn, he definitely had that black humor, and this podcast, I for sure he was one of my mentors as well, and this is dedicated to mentors everywhere, but also this was kind of born out of many GeoPub conversations that I had with him.
Yeah.
So definitely. I mean, I was never quite so insulted by him, but that was just, a way of him showing love.
It was his way of showing love, definitely.
Great. So then I guess moving from that into more just our little geochemistry portion, you picked a really straightforward paper, but I think in its simplicity, it really did a great job at pointing out some of the ways in which we as geochemists see errors in the way that people are making their maps. So I think I'll start from there, just saying that when we were chatting about a topic that interested you, you immediately gravitated towards the topic that all geoscientists can be geochemists, and that all geochemists should be really good geoscientists, which definitely 100% agree with that. We can't just have chemistry by itself. It has to live with other data sets in the geosciences. But that said, can you flesh the statement out a bit more for our audience? Because I think it's a really great one with really great merit.
When you ask me about which paper we should talk about, I immediately remember this because I think that this was the paper that bring me into the geochemistry. As you say, perhaps it's a very simple paper, quite straightforward, but if you start reading it, you will see all the tips that you need as a geochemist to do well your job. So, and also gives you or tells you what are the question or the things that you have to be always in mind in order to do a good job related to a geochemistry survey. So before talking about the maps as itself, in order to develop a good map, first you have to do a lot of work before. So you have to remember that your geochemistry map is your final product. Is where you will make a summary of all your results and finally sell your product to the other people. Perhaps it's not only for you. The map is in order to show or the map should speak by itself about the results that you make with your survey. So finally, building a map, as the title says, geochemical mapping, technical art, I will say both. It's technique and art. So you as a geologist or a geochemist, you will have to balance these two things in order to get your best product. So I think that should be the introduction for what you asked.
So one thing that jumped out at me in the introduction to this paper is a statement that basic problems start with survey design and include choice of the right sample material for the problem at hand, selection of an appropriate sample density, ensuring that different teams in the field use comparable sampling procedures, avoiding contamination of the samples during sampling, transport, and in the lab, and establishing an external and lab-independent quality control procedure that's able to identify problems involving sampling, sample prep, and analysis of the samples. There's a huge amount to unpack in that statement, but it touches on some key topics that we have huge problem with in exploration. Not every team also has the luxury of having a geochemist. So that said, what do you recommend is the base level knowledge that every geoscientist needs to have before planning a survey in terms of creating a rigorous sampling program?
Okay, Sam, is something similar to what we were talking about before. The paper itself goes in order to understand or how to create the final product. But before that, the final product that will become a map have all these things that you already said, from a good survey planning, what are you going to sample, until what is the digestion that you will choose in the lab. So it sounds like a simple question, but it's so much that is in the background that you have to be aware of. So let's start with a little example about, for example, porphyry copper exploration. This could be quite different if you're leading with environmental sampling or for a high sulfidation. But let's go with the porphyry example. For example, you are thinking about trying to define a target in an area, and first you have to start to use some question like, okay, what is the target size that I'm expecting? For example, so a porphyry copper footprint could be like 2 kilometers square. Okay, so if then you say, okay, what is my budget? Okay, I have a little budget, a lot of budget. Okay, if I have a little budget, perhaps you will design a line. Okay, with the line, you will, in order to understand what could be a footprint. So you say, okay, in a line, perhaps I will take 2 or 3 samples inside this area, and the other will be background. Okay, but with that, it should be enough to have contrast from background to anomaly. Then, okay, if you have more budget, okay, you can go with the mesh and things like that. After that, you have to understand what will be your sample media. Okay, you are sampling in a pampa, or you will have a lot of outcrops. So define what is your sample media that will tell you more about what you are looking for. So if you are in the Cordillera with a lot of outcrops, you are not going to start taking soil samples. It's not worthy. So start taking rock chip samples. And the other thing is, what I've seen a lot when you get some data from other companies or projects that are selling to you, that they mix sample media. So you get a sample from rock, from soil, from talud, and they are expecting that everything is the same. No, it's not the same. If you start taking samples of rock, just do rock chips. If you're taking samples of soil, do soil sample, but do not mix apples with apples, pears with pears, period. And after that, you have to choose your digestion method and your analysis method. It's not the same in aqua regia, it's not the same for acid, it's not the same partial leach extraction. You have to understand what you are looking for, what you want to look for, and with that, you will choose your best method to start analyzing or to discover that geochemical footprint that you're looking for. I think that that's the three main aspects that in order to design a good geochemical survey.
That and obviously planning out the QA/QC throughout the whole thing.
And of course, yeah.
Just have to throw it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've recently...
The QA/QC aspect is a huge thing to discuss, perhaps in a moment, but most of companies do not do QA/QC to their samples or to their surveys. And you find a lot of mistakes when they don't do it.
Yeah, no, I was looking through what was supposed to be a stream sediment survey. It was done over, clearly, I would say, many years, except that it also had heavy mineral concentrates in it. It had what it was probably a standard 80 mesh, but then it also had 150 mesh in it. And all of them were all so different, and they were sprinkled out all throughout the area. You couldn't really, say, okay, we're only doing heavy mineral concentrates over here, and we're doing the other ones like here. It was really all over the place, and it was from a major mining company. So I found it surprising that it was so disorganized. But no, I know exactly what you're saying. We definitely have to do apples with apples, and maybe in Chile you guys say apples with apples and pears with pears, but us English speaking people, we definitely say oranges.
Okay.
Yeah. No, and I think that doing things as lines, and which is just for our listeners out there, there was a paper back in, I think it was 2004 by Ian Cameron, which you were also talking about back when you were doing your master's and looking at some of the work that he did with MMI and enzyme leach and the whole bucket, really. I think it was done over Spence, so also another Chilean deposit.
Yeah. Well, most of the paper in that time doing partial leach extraction were all with one line over the deposit. And well, the master thesis that I did was doing a mesh over tokens.
Well, 400 samples.
Yeah, so we went to the other level of sampling and just getting like these peaks over the line. The idea was to, because we were looking for a porphyry, we were looking for donut-like anomalies. So and it was quite interesting, and we got some donut anomalies, and just above one of the porphyries in that cluster.
Cool. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to move on to our next question here, because I know that from myself, when mapping geochemical anomalies in soils or sediments, many people, unless you've gotten into the world of geochem, they don't have that a priori knowledge that considerations like iron and manganese oxides need to be considered in their analysis. So we, as geochemists, know that these types of oxides like to just suck up metals and they'll create false anomalies. So what do we think we can do to try and combat problems like this? Because in the worst case situation is that time and time again, people say, geochemistry failed because it gave bad targets, when really it was just a lack of knowledge as to, some of these, more superficial types of things that can happen to metals as they're moving around in the surface environment. So what do you think?
What do I think? I think that most of the time people don't understand what they are sampling. They don't understand what the results are showing up. So yeah, of course, when you sample, you will have to lead with a lot of problems and things like, as you said, the manganese things try to absorb ions and give you perhaps some signals that will mask other things that you are trying to understand, but trying to wrap up the things. First, understand what you are sampling, and then that is a huge question. What is the significance of an anomaly, and what is your background? How you define your background? How do you define what is an anomaly? How do you treat outliers? And all of those things reflect some of the geology that you are picking up. So one thing is your geochemistry, and the other thing is the geology that produce your geochemistry signals. So geology is hand by hand with your results.
Yeah, so it's almost like one of the, the asterisks is there whenever you get a geochemistry data set back is more so than, be happy about, high gold number or high copper number. It's just more, okay, well, ask yourself why you have that high number.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and also that.
And if that high number is significant. So, and the other thing that most of the people do not observe or do not pay attention is the low numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that geochemistry, most of these things related to background and threshold and outliers and those and those concepts comes from environmental geochemistry, where you try to understand what is the anthropogenic products in your geochemistry data. But for example, for us that do exploration geochemistry, low numbers are also significant and are as important as the high numbers. For example, when you go to a manager or colleagues, sometimes you present your maps and say, okay, but there's no copper here. Yeah, there's no anomaly of copper, but perhaps you have a depletion of copper that is also telling you something. So you have to correlate that depletion with your geology. Perhaps you are just above a leached area where you will have a depletion of copper, you will have a little bit of moly, but you will have a lot of arsenic, perhaps, I don't know, tungsten or other things that are more related to sericitic or advanced argillic alteration that you will have to balance and to say, okay, to your colleagues, okay, I don't have copper, but I have these other elements.
No, I think that's a great point. And just that, one of the things that we're always looking for too are instead of just, having, just these one-dimensional, here's my copper map, here's my arsenic map, here's my gold map. We're looking for multi-element anomalism. And because anything that's very complex, that's where things start to get interesting.
Exactly. So I think that 10 or 15 years ago, most of the people just did univariate lectures or analysis of their geochemistry dataset. When I started in geochemistry, I at least I started to play with factor analysis and neuronal networks. Today, you can do much more fancy things with machine learning, with random forest things, and where you can squeeze your data and get much more from your results. And that was a quite nice statement in the paper, and you told me some days ago that when this paper was written, iogas, for example, didn't exist. And how you plot your data into a map 15 years ago is not the same as we do today. Things evolve, and how you sell your products to your management and your colleagues is still is evolving day by day.
Yeah, and I think, building on the iogas thing, just something that I was counseled to do when I was a younger geochemist, and something that they talk about in this paper was that one of the recommendations is to use, that I've received, is to use the progressive half, which iogas has built in, such that the lower 50% of the element, so say the gold value, is all in one color or size, and then the percentiles built from there. The author, though, here argues that the data structure and thus ease of interpretation of geochemical processes behind the regional distribution of an element is increasingly lost because of that. Do you have any thoughts? Like, how would you, when you're making your map, say, for copper distribution, do you have any preferred way that you like to just look at it, say, to start with in iogas, or, you know, as a finished product? Are they different?
Oof. Yes. Yes. Well, perhaps my first recommendation is, before you do anything of that, explore your data. Play with your data, understand what is the geometry of your data. So do your histograms, do your cumulative plots, everything. But finally, I found that a good way to first to plot the data is using the Tukey plots. I think that it's quite a straightforward way to understand what are your anomalies and what is your background. First, because the Tukey plots does not matter if the data is normal, log normal. It doesn't care. It just tells you, okay, from this number up will be anomaly, because it's just, you take your 50% of your data, you multiply it for, that width of the 50% of your data, you multiply it for 1.5, and above that, it's anomalous. Okay, it's quite straightforward. When you use means and things like that, whatever outlier you will have, it will make your mean too much away from your median, for example. For example, when you use the standard deviation, it will become meaningless. So whatever thing that doesn't care about your internal structure of your data, I think is a first good way to move forward. Also, whatever area that you are working on is independent, for me, is independent for another area. So whatever background or anomaly that you are of one project, I cannot translate it to another area. I always work projects as independent, geochemically independent.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying there. I guess like one thing that they also brought up in the paper, and I think it's the last point that we'll make together today, is just that another thing that people tend to do is to, because geochemical data typically is not normal, it's typically a bit more, say, log normal, but a big problem that we also have is a lot of times, because there's, say, different rock types, for instance, is that our data isn't necessarily always log normal either, because it's polypopulational. So that also is going to affect the way that you draw your maps. So really, like, I think what you were saying earlier as well, just having a really good handle, being a good geoscientist and having a good handle on the geology is also going to be really important for when you're interpreting your data, building your maps, that kind of thing. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. No geochemical products will mean something if you don't have a good geology. So geology comes first, and geochemistry is a good layer of data that will help you to make decisions. So I think that everyone have to have in mind that it's the same when you do your physics. You can do NIP, you can do magnetometry, but if it's not attached with your geology, it's meaningless. So you will have a lot of blues and reds, and what does it mean?
I don't think we should share this opinion with geophysicists, though. I think we know a few that might take that, a little bit.
No, but with geochemistry is the same. You can build a lot of white geochemical maps with blues and reds, but but you have to relate it with your geological processes behind that blues and reds, although they will be meaningless.
So, Herman, I just want to thank you so much for talking with us today. I think we had a really great conversation that our listeners for sure will have benefited from, both on your views of survey development and then also visualization of results. But before we go, I know that you wanted to make a plug for the 29th International Applied Geochemistry Symposium in Viña del Mar. And as this is a podcast devoted to geochemistry, how could I say no? So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sam, for giving me this couple of minutes to introduce the symposium. Tell our listeners that we will be having the 29th International Applied Geochemical Symposium from the 23rd to the 29th of October in Viña del Mar, Chile. So everyone is invited. The symposium is, as it says, is about applied geochemistry with themes related to exploration geochemistry, environmental geochemistry, data science, field portable devices. We will have also a space where we will talk about geochemistry related to viticulture and terroir. So it will be quite diverse. Isotopic geochemistry, it will be quite diverse. We're expecting people from all over the world. Everyone is invited to this symposium. This symposium is in memory of our friend, Dr. Peter Winterborn. So we will be honoring him. Looking forward that people will come. We'll have a quite nice field trips. I invite you to visit the webpage www.iax2022.cl. So there you will have all the information that you need for coming to this event.
Great, thanks so much. And if anybody cares, I'll be there too.
Good.
I booked my ticket.
Okay, great. So you will be presenting something.
I'm not quite sure about that yet. If there's something interesting that comes up, maybe.
Okay, great.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us this month. And next month, we look forward to seeing you again. And you can check out our webpage at www.geochemistry.com to look up and see what our next shows are. Thank you.